Hello and welcome to Beginners Python and Machine Learning. My name is Tim Cummings. We're a weekly session where to introduce people to programming in Python, and we also do some machine learning skills. I won't be doing any machine learning tonight, but we're looking at Python, how to create a game in Wordle, and we're continuing on from our previous sessions where we've had a game that we worked out how the logic worked, and then we put it into a graphical user interface. Tonight we're going to look at some of the cross-platform issues after we tested it. I tested it on Mac and Windows, and so we'll sort out those issues, and then we'll create an installer so we can copy it to someone else and they can run the program on their computer without having to install Python. Now, the first week of every month we do an absolute beginner session, so that was last week, and the other sessions are a little bit harder, but we're still aimed at beginners, so feel free to ask questions. I haven't had many registrations tonight, so probably the lowest number of registrations ever. The next lowest was the one I had for part 3 of this season, so I think my Wordle game is not so popular, but in saying that, the number of views I've had since the live session has been the highest, second highest of any of my videos I've ever done, so I don't know what to make of that. You can chat if you're watching live. You can chat through Slack. So this is our Slack channel, Beginners Python and Machine Learning, Learning to Code, and I'm also going to be watching the YouTube chat. So let's see if I can find where that is. Oh yeah, and Peter's chatting, so yep, I think it's just Peter and me tonight. Good to see you, Peter. Okay, so let's get started. This is our meetup, so if you register for the meetup, then I know you're coming. But you don't have to register, that's just a voluntary thing, but it does tell you how to get onto the Slack space. I've got this link here to the source code. That link is also in the comments below the YouTube video. So let's click on the link and grab some source code. So this is the source code we're going to use tonight, and so it's got all the stuff that we've developed in our previous sessions, and then a few extra tasks on that we're going to solve tonight. So task 1, you're going to have Python 3 installed on your computer, and that includes tkinter, but if you're installing on Mac or Windows, tkinter is automatically installed when you install Python 3. If you're on Linux, then you'll have to probably install it additionally. And if you're not using the standard install from python.org, for example, if you're using the Mac ports version of Python, then you will also need to add tkinter in if you're using a Mac. Alright, so I've got Python 3 installed on my computer. If you've got any problems with that, feel free to ask any questions. But that's, yeah, we've covered that before. Task 2, create and activate a virtual environment. Alright, I might do this one from the command line, just so that you get a view of how that works. So I'll start up my command prompt. So that's on Windows. On Mac you can run terminal, even on Windows you can run Windows terminal. Now we're going to create a folder, and I'm going to stick it in the Pycharm projects folder, because later on I'll be using Pycharm as my IDE. So let's make a directory for our project, and I'll call it Beginners Python and Machine Learning 146. And we'll change directory into that one. So task 2, And then we're going to create a virtual environment. So I've got the instructions here for Windows or Mac, or if you're using Anaconda, it's slightly different to straight normal Python. So let's do the Python one. So we run py, which is because Python, when you install Python with the default configuration, Python is not on the path, but py is on the path, and that then calls the correct version of Python that it thinks that you need in any particular instance, whether it's Python 3 or Python 2. Python 2's end of life, so really you shouldn't be using Python 2 anymore. But anyway, so we're going to create a virtual environment with py, which will run Python 3 for us. And let's call that virtual environment venv vpaml146. Okay, now that'll create a folder, and inside that folder it'll install the libraries that we're going to use, and we can activate this virtual environment, and by doing that it means that anything we install won't affect any other Python projects that we're using. If you're using PowerShell, you might need to run this command as well, set execution policy to so that you can run scripts from the command line, but for some reason Windows says it's safe. It's okay if you do it in the command prompt to run scripts, but they don't want you running them in PowerShell. Alright, now we're going to activate this. So to activate it, we run activate.bat for Windows command prompt, and that's in the scripts folder. So I'll just say venv scripts activate.bat. I'm just using tab completion there, and now I know it's active because it's got the virtual environment name at the beginning. So now I can run Python. I don't have to use py anymore, and it'll tell me which version it is. So 3.10.2 is the one I've got installed. This should work with Python 3.8 or later, what we're doing tonight. I can have a look to see what third-party libraries I've got. These are the really standard ones. These come with Python because I haven't installed any third-party ones. It's telling me there's a later version of pip, and I can run this long command here to upgrade it, but there's actually a shorter command I can do, which is just pip install upgrade pip, and that's downloaded the later version of pip, replaced the older version with the newer version. Still installing, and oh yeah, and access denied. So it tried to install it back in app data local, but it doesn't have permission to do that, but that's okay because that's for the uninstall, but it's fine to do the new install in our virtual environment. And so now if I do pip list, I can see I've got the later version 22.1.2. Okay, so task 3 over here is create a file requirements.txt. Now I could just use a text editor like Notepad or Notepad++, but I think I might start using my IDE, my Integrated Development Environment. So I'm going to use Pycharm from JetBrains as the Community Edition's free. That's all I'm using. And let's open this one. Let's create it. Actually, before we do that, I'm going to save this file in our project directory that we've created. So save page as, and it's going to be a type Python file, and I'm going to put it in that Pycharm projects, which is my home folder, and I'll put it next to the virtual environment folder. Okay, and now I'm going to open that project. So there's the one we did the other day, and here's the new one we've created. Do I trust this one? I trust it, I wrote it. And here it is. There's the folder we've just created. There's our virtual environment we've just created. It's used the Python that's in our folder as our interpreter. So let's have a look, just check that it's using the right one. So it's in users, Pytho, that's my username, Pycharm project, BPAML146, and there's the virtual environment, and there's the Python that we're using. Now we're in a graphical user interface. Some things are a bit easier to do. So like before it told us we had to upgrade pip, we should probably upgrade setup tools as well. And we can do that just by clicking on the upgrade button there. And I can see that that's the version 58.1 that was installed, and the latest version 62.4. And just clicking on that button, that upgraded it for us, so that's all good. Okay, so let's have a look at the text of our program. We've done task 1, task 2, and we're down here on task 3. So create a file called requirements.txt, and we put in, it's going to have this contents. So they're the 3 third-party libraries that we're going to need. So I'm going to copy that to my clipboard with Control C, and then I'm going to click here. So don't ever put anything into this virtual environment folder that's being managed by pip. So we want to put stuff just in our project folder. And it's going to be called requirements.txt, and that's a convention, but it's a pretty standard one that people use. And if you call your file requirements.txt, other programmers are going to know what you're doing. So I've just pasted in the requirements there, and you see even Pycharm recognizes requirements.txt because it says, do you want to install those requirements? So I can just click yes and install, and it will install them. It's also got a plugin that supports requirements.txt files, but I don't know what more you'd need than what it already offers, so I'm just going to ignore that extension. Okay, now I can run terminal here, which is like we were in the command line before. It's already activated the file for us. So now if I do pip list, you can see that it's got the files that were installed before, which was pip and setup tools. It's also got the new ones that we said we wanted, pyinstaller. In fact, it hasn't got them all yet. We're still waiting on Beautiful Soup 4 and LXML. So let's try this again, see if they've installed yet. So Beautiful Soup 4 is now there, LXML, and then it's got a few others like AltGraph, Future, PFile, and their dependencies are the ones that we've needed. They also need those ones, so they got installed as well for us. So it's a pretty convenient way of installing third-party libraries. If you wanted to do that all from the command line, you could just say pip install -r requirements.txt. Okay, task 4. Now I tried the program that we were working on last time on a Mac platform, and it didn't work, and that surprised me. So I had to do a little bit of research to find out why it wasn't working. So some of the things that weren't working, the labels weren't getting the background colors. So you can see we want to have background colors on these labels so that we can see which letters are in the right place, which are the right letters in the wrong place, and which letters are the wrong letters. So we're relying on background colors. So if the theme Aqua doesn't allow setting the background colors, then we're not going to be able to show easily the what status each of the letters is in. Alright, and then I've got some hints here on how to fix that. You can find out what all the theme names are that tkinter uses using this command here. We can get the current theme using the theme use function, and we can set the theme using theme use. Alright, so let's work on that, and we'll go down here. Now this is all this stuff at the beginning is really comments that describe the program, and I've enclosed some in triple quotes here so I can have new lines in there, and this is all documentation for this module. I've even put an R out the front, and that's pretty useful if I've got backslashes in here, and I do have some backslashes, so it just says don't use these backslashes as backslashes. This is just a raw text. Otherwise it'll start assuming these are special characters, which can cause problems. Alright, now your typical Python script is going to start off with your import statements, and import will include your standard libraries, and it'll include your third-party libraries. So all of the top ones here are standard libraries that come with Python but still need to be imported, and then these ones here are the third-party libraries. Well, in fact, that's the third-party library. This one might need to be installed or can come with Python. So it's sort of half and half. Whether you'd call it, I'd still call this one a third-party library, but python.org does give it to you. All right, if you remember the code from before, we create our root, which is our top-level window that controls our application, and we get our style variable, which is a link to our style database. And here's our task: fix the cross-platform issues with our tkinter app. All right. So what have I done? Oh yeah, I'll turn that off for now. That's the solution. And let's write this from scratch. So if I just run it as it is, and I'll use this one, I'll print the theme names. Okay, now you see I've imported this library, this module here, TTK, from tkinter as TTK. So I've given it a shorter name that's like an alias, so I don't have to put in the full tkinter.ttk when I'm using it. I can just use the alias, which is just TTK. Alright, so let's run this. I can run this using Control-Shift F10 or Control-Shift R if you're on Mac. Okay, now it's, as well as opening up our window, it's displayed the names, the list of all the themes. Now you can see Aqua's not in that list, but if it was, we'd have to change it to something else. So let's see what theme we're currently using. And let's set it to default, whatever that is. So you can play around with these themes and see which one you like the best. But one of them was called default, so let's try that one. Okay, so by default it doesn't use default. By default on Windows it uses Vista, and on Mac it uses Aqua. And I did a print there, but I didn't need to do that. So now I've set it to default, and it looks slightly different to what it did before. Alright, So yeah, I didn't really need a print there. Now I've provided a solution which does the same thing, and I've put it in a function here which makes it easy to turn on and off. And I've used logging rather than print statements, and that's always a good thing to do in your programs, because you can turn off and on a whole suite of your logging statements just by setting what the logging level is. So at the moment we've just created a logger for logging, but we haven't set a level. So if I set the level to debug, then anything that's logger.debug will get displayed. By default, it will start off using the warning level. So warning is really code that needs attention, but debug is stuff that programmers use because they just want to see how the program's running. So I've got all these logger.debugs in there. I'll have it set for debug at the moment, and then when I'm finished, we'll set the level back, and all of these extraneous logging statements will cease to produce any logging output. So in the solution, I check if the theme in use is Aqua. If it is, then I check to make sure that default is available, and if it is, I use that theme. Otherwise, I'll just grab the first theme in the full list of theme names that isn't Aqua, and I'll use that. And I put a break in here. Break just means if you've got a break in an if statement, it'll break out of the enclosing for loop or while loop that you've got. So once it hits the first one of those, it'll stop going through this for loop any more times. Alright, so let's run S4 theme, and I'll comment this stuff out. We don't need it anymore. Okay, you can see the debug logging is coming out here. It gives you a bit more information. It's telling you what module it's come from, and main is the one that is the first one that's run. It's not being called from anywhere else. There are themes. That's the current one, and we've set it. And I've got some other logging statements later on in the program. Alright, so let's leave that, and we'll go and have a look at task 5. Maybe task 5's down a bit low. Okay, so if you remember, we a couple of weeks ago we had we created a event handler called handle key press for letters, but the way we designed it didn't work for the Mac. So I've put in the whole function here that we're starting with, just so you've got a reference point, but that one's not getting called anywhere. This is the one that's getting called, handle key press for letters, and the task 5 is to change this so that it works. So task 5, fix the cross-platform issues with our tkinter app, reading the backspace and enter key on Mac OS, and so we have to find an alternative way of determining if backspace or enter key has been pressed. So hints: use dir event to find which attributes can be used. Alright, so this is an exploratory way of programming. We know that we're getting this event. The documentation wasn't that great at telling us how we were supposed to use this event. So what we were doing was we were taking the event.character, we were looking to see what character got in there, and we found that if the delete key was pressed, it had an ASCII value of 8, and if the enter key was pressed, it had an ASCII value equivalent to new line. We thought we'd check for carriage returns as well, just in case that came through, but these things didn't work when we tried it on the Mac. So what we have to do is we have to find out a way to use this event that will work on Mac and Windows. So we're trying to find a cross-platform solution. So let's put in some debug logging, and what we're going to look for is all the attributes and methods that are available on event, and maybe there's some other attributes that we can use. So I'm going to use f strings for logging here, and I'm going to use the logging format. So we use curly braces around what we want logged, and we put in the value of what we want logged, so dir, or return a list of all the attributes and methods, and I'm going to put the equal sign there, and that's the logging format. What it does is it will print out this list in our logging statement, but it'll also give it a label, directory event equals. Alright, so let's we'll run that to start with, and that's the first part of our code. So now if I press any key, I'll press the A key, it creates an event, and the event has all of these attributes, so all these double underscores. So I don't really want to use them, they're normally private methods, but over here are some interesting ones. We've got char, which we've been using. We've got key code, that looks like it could be useful, keysim num, and num. And these other ones, type might be useful. Alright, so let's log a few of these values, and see if any of them are going to be useful. And you'd have to do this on a Mac as well, to make sure that the solution that you come up with is cross-platform. A key code, that looks like a good one. What else have we got here? Keysim num, let's try that. Type. Alright, so let's try that. I better quit the program from before, and we'll try running it. Now I can press the play button here, and I'll press the A key, and we get event.car equals A, keysim equals A, keysim num equals 97, key code equals 65, event.num, well that's nothing, so that's not much use, and event type, I forgot to put the equals in, but it came up as 2. So I'll stick that equals in so we can see next time. So looking at these, now if I ran this same code on a Mac, this key code here would come up as a very large number. So I'm not sure what it's doing, but I think it's looking at the it's coming from the Mac operating system, so the Mac operating system is giving some large key codes for these things. Let's press enter and see what we get. So there we go, it's \r is what we get by pressing enter, but keysim is return, the word return for being the return key. Keysim num is like a large number. Key code is 13. So what was key code up here? 65. Yes. I think we're going to want to use, maybe it's key code is the one we want to use. So let's try capital A. And remember, our code requires us to do lowercase character letters. So it's picked up all the shift keys that I've pressed, and then A, keysim num is 65, key code is 65. So you can see that key code is the same whether we've got upper or lowercase. So I think we'll go for keysim num here, and I'll just have to remember, if I look in the answers to see what I used, which one of those I used, because I tested it on the Mac. Alright, and we can use these key sims. So see, they've got different, so that's telling me I use the shift key, and I use the shift key on the right. You can also use the shift key on the left. When I press the enter key, that came up as return. Now, another difference between Mac and Windows is that the enter key on the keypad and the enter key on the main keyboard return different values. One's called return and the other one's called keypad enter. So we can test for both of those so that we can cater for both whatever someone presses on their keyboard in whichever operating system. Backspace, we should see what backspace returns. So let's have a look at backspace. And I've got to, I think I deleted some code here. There we go. I'll go up here. So I've got the Windows, got the focus, press the backspace, and it comes up here. The key sim is backspace. So that's pretty useful. All right. So what are we doing? Log the values. Yep. Remove all uses of ORD event.character and event.character in that, because they don't work. All right. Okay. So let's use if event.keysim equals backspace. That works. And the same thing down here. This one here. So that handles the backspace. And so if you remember what all this code is doing, it's working out what to do on as each letter is pressed. So when the first letter is pressed, it's got to put a letter in. If someone presses a backspace, then it's got to remove the letter, set the current letter counter back, and it could be that we've got to the end of the row. So if I typed all of that and then pressed enter, I get this error message saying it's not a word. So if I press backspace now, I want the red to go away. So that's what these line of code here do, is they reset all the letters back to the normal state, because we've acknowledged that it's not a word, and so we've pressed the backspace key. Okay, then we check that we haven't run out of guesses, and our current letter is less than 5. So if someone types in a letter, then we can enter it into the label text. But if it's a backspace, then we want to set the current label text to nothing. All right, and now this one, if event.keysim in, remember it had the text, it was just a string return. Now I'm going to stick that into a list, because when it's in a list, I can now put in the code for the keypad enter, which is, if you're using Linux or Mac, is what you'd get by pressing the enter key on the keypad. But Windows, there's no way you can tell. Windows will return the same value for both enter keys. All right, so we've done that. Logs out, replace all of those which don't work. Okay, so that's all good. Let's see what task 6 is. Maybe task. Let's look at the solution. Solution 5, event handler. So here you can say, when I was finding all the attributes and functions in event. I did a little bit of a list comprehension here to get rid of all the ones that start with an underscore, so that I could just concentrate on the ones that were important. I chose pretty much the same list of attributes that I thought were important. We checked for backspace the same way. We checked for return and enter the same way, and that's all the changes that we made. Alright, well, let's try running that. I better quit the old program. Control Shift F10, and let's try running. Okay, so it's giving me some, so this is all working fine, and there we go. I found the solution in 3 goes. Alright, so let's keep working away through the code. Define constants. So our URL goes to the New York Times. That's where we get our word list. Now I came across another cross-platform issue, is when we run this after we've installed it and using pyinstaller, the Mac puts it in a sandbox, which is a different path each time. And the current working directory is the root directory, which it won't let you write to. So you can look up this documentation for pyinstaller, which is what we're going to use later to create an executable. And it says use sys.mypass to find what directory the program's been bundled into. And you can find that bundle directory using sys.mypass. If sys doesn't have mypass, which of course means you're running it without having been built with pyinstaller, then just look at the directory that the current file is, and __file__ or dunder file is a Python way of finding out where the current file is. So that's the path to the current file, and parent is the folder that includes it. Alright, so we've currently got the bundle directory as just pathlib.path of the current file and the parent, and we're going to store the 5-letter answers and 5-letter guesses in this directory. And the way this works, this is using the pathlib, which is a standard library of Python, and what they've done is they've overloaded the /, which you'd normally use for division, but because we like to use /s in our directories, they've gone, well, that's an operator, we can override that, overload it, and make it assemble paths. So it gets the directory, a /, and then the name of the file. So this is how we get the name of the file that we want to create, and as you can see here, we've created these files just by using this code here. So every time we run this program, it checks to see if these files exist. If it doesn't, it goes off to New York Times, grabs the latest word list, and creates those files. And we want it to do the same when we've created an executable for this code. So our task here is to use this hint from pyinstaller of what we're going to do, of how to do it. So we have to convert it a little bit because we've just done import pathlib. We haven't done from pathlib import path. So it's going to look pretty much the same as this. So let's just copy and paste. But we get an error because we have imported it differently. So let's change, just put the library name in front of the class name. And that worked. And why am I getting an error at the end? Who knows? It's expecting, oh yeah, I've run out of, I need another close parentheses. And you can see it's, that's the advantage of these IDEs, they highlight that those are the two matching parentheses. Okay, so the way getAttribute works, it takes our, in this case it's a module called sys that we've imported earlier. It looks for an attribute called myPath. If it exists, it'll return what the value of that attribute is. If it doesn't exist, then it'll return this here, which means that we're not running it from a pyinstaller type installed program, we're running it just locally in our IDE. Okay, I'm getting a warning here saying that I've redeclared bundle directory, so let's just comment out this previous line, get rid of that warning. And I've put a logging statement here to say what it is. Okay, so that wasn't very hard, and we're not actually testing it yet because it's still using that attribute doesn't exist, so we're just using the same default that we had before. But we'll just check that it works. ALBUM. There we go, got it in 2. Having a good run here. Okay, if you've got any questions, feel free to ask about what all this code is doing. There's our fetching the word lists and saving the files. And there's our event loop. So that's really the end of our code. So we can be pretty happy with that code. And you can see here that's where our solution to task 5 is being called from handle key press, and we've bound any key press to our root window to handle key press. Let's go back up to the top and have a look at our task 7. So now we want to use pyinstaller to create a single executable file for your platform. Alright, and I've given you the code here. So windowed means it's in a graphical user interface, so we don't need a terminal window to pop up when we run this. One file, so it'll by default it'll create all the installer files, the executable files, into one directory, but we want to make it easier to copy these around. Is just put them all into one file. So it'll package it all up into one file, and it's because we've managed to get our entire program into a single script without extra packages and things like that as part of our code. It makes it quite easy to do this deployment. If you've got a more complicated program that's built into a package, they suggest you write a simple script that calls that package and then run the pyinstaller on that simple script, and it will work out that it needs the other package and it will bundle it up together. So this will work out all the third-party library requirements that we've got and bundle them all into the one package. Alright, so let's copy this, and I'll go to the terminal, and I'll just use the terminal built in here, but I could have done this from the command line command prompt. And I'm just going to I'm going to paste that into terminal, and let's run that. So you can see it's got to go off and do a bit of work. So it's checking the analysis, it's looking for which third-party libraries that we've got, doing analyzing how the code works. Doing all this, building the package. Alright, so now it's done it. Now if we look back up here at our project, we'll see that there's 2 new folders have been created. One, the build, that's just all the stuff that it needed to do to put everything together. And then in the dist it created our executable. So that's what's ready for distribution. So let's go back out to Windows and see what it looks like. So it was in our Pycharm projects, and here's our dist folder, and there it is. Meetup 146, Tim, wordle, tkinter, pyinstaller. So you could, I think you can rename that here if you wanted to, just to wordle. Let's try that. And run it. Now it's a little bit slow to get started, and one of the reasons for that is that it has to go off and find the 5-letter answers and 5-letter guesses. I thought it was going to put them in there, but maybe it's using the one. So we'll try moving this next. Now we can try. Oh, it's got a U in it. Interesting. Ruses. Anyway, that seems to be working. I can't think of a word that starts with RU. Anyway, but we'll quit that, and we'll try moving this out of here. So this is just a file now that you can give to your friends, and they can play your game to their heart's content. In fact, let's put it on our desktop. See if that works. Okay, it's looking good. Yep, I'm not having much luck now without my hints, but and that's working well. So I wonder where it's saving. The guesses and answers. So let's go back to here and delete these files. Doesn't need to be a safe delete. And we'll run this again. There we go. Well, that is interesting. I expected those files to turn up somewhere. They're not in the root directory. So there must be a temporary folder somewhere that they're going into. So they must be doing similar to what Mac does. And if we wanted to find out what it was, where it was, then we can write the output to a file, and we can do that. Let's do that. We've got a little bit of time left. So, and now I can put in the full path name, so that I know exactly where it's going to be. And I've normally done this as on other platforms. So let's put in 5-letter answers, and we'll convert that to a string. So that's a path up until there. Let's just convert that to a string, and then that'll close the file. Okay, and then I'll rebuild it again. And I might just try running it from here. Just no such file. Yeah, so I should probably users. Did I get the path wrong? C users Pytho wordle. Okay, let's try using forward slashes because I'm not confident with backslashes. No. So it doesn't like that either. Okay, so let's put it into Pycharm projects. So this could be a security issue that's keeping it out of the home directory. And maybe it likes a C at the front. That's what I had to do. I said I'm opening the file for writing, not for reading. Okay, so that worked. And it's created them locally there. So let's build that and try running it as a built program. So I'll just delete it, delete all of this. And while it's doing that, if we look over here in our Pycharm projects, there's the file that we've created, which just says where we're saving 5-letter answers.txt. So I'm going to delete this one, and then we're going to run it as an executable and see where it saves it. Okay. Let's have a look in here to see where it saved it. App data local temp. So there you go. It is putting it in a sandbox. So every time we run it, that'll probably be a different location. So it does mean that our program is going to be a little bit slow to start up because every time we start it, it's going to have to go off to New York Times and get the word list. But we could hard code in a particular place on the directory path if we knew where we wanted that to save, so that it doesn't change each time. All right, well that's all from the session tonight. I hope you enjoyed that, and the next couple of weeks are going to be off because the Fast AI course is on that Arun will be teaching at. But hopefully next month we'll have Arun back to do some machine learning stuff, and I'll be back as well at some stage. So the first week of July we're going to have a absolute beginner session. We're toying around with actually having it at the state library or some other location so people can actually turn up if they want, but we'll confirm that closer to the day. And that's all for tonight. Thank you, Peter. Peter said he learnt something, so that was good. And I learned something as well. I learnt where those files are getting saved in Windows. And that's the thing with cross-platform, is there's just so many different combinations of things to try. All right, hope you enjoyed that. I'll catch you around.